All right, we've got a juicy conversation coming up next, all about how sex and relationships change during midlife. And if you're in midlife, you know what I'm talking about. Joining me today to talk about the good, the bad, and the very personal are Tamsen Fadal, who spent 3 decades as an Emmy Award-winning news anchor before becoming one of the best-known advocates in the menopause space. She's the creator and executive producer of the PBS documentary, The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause, and her latest book, How to Menopause, Take Charge of Your Health, Reclaim Your Life, and Feel Even Better Than Before, comes out on March 25th, 2 weeks. Mark your calendars. Joining her is Dr. Rachel Pope, a board-certified OBGYN. She is the chief of the Female Sexual Health Division and part of the Gender Care Program in the Urology Institute at University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center. Finally, we have Naomi Watts, who you maybe just saw in that commercial behind me. She is not only an Oscar-nominated actress and a producer, but the founder of the menopause wellness brand Stripes Beauty, which she was inspired to create after learning at the age of 36 that she was in early menopause. She talks all about her experience in her new book, Dare I Say It, Everything I Wish I'd Known About Menopause, which came out in January. Please welcome Tamsen Fadal, Dr. Rachel Pope, and Naomi Watts. So the name of this panel is provocatively titled, Hotter Than Ever? Sex in Midlife. And so I want to start by asking you to give us the lowdown and answer that question. Can sex in midlife be hotter than ever? Tamsen, since I know you're not shy, I'm starting with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things change. There's no question about that. And I think that you have communication becomes very, very key during this time. But I think it can be better than ever because you know your body. Hopefully your partner knows your body. And if your partner doesn't know your body, you're going to talk about it and make sure that they do.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Dr. Pope, can it be better than ever? What do your patients say?
Absolutely. And even beyond midlife. I have to tell you, a couple of days ago, I was in the office and an 85-year-old woman came in with her 86-year-old boyfriend. They are having the best sex of their lives. Their only issue is some UTIs that are popping up after sex, but we're taking care of that. It's treatable. And so we have hope. Why not in our 40s to 50s if there's people in their 80s who are living it up?
I love that.
Naomi, you run an entire company where you're talking to women about what their experiences are like. How is sex in midlife?
I would say pretty good. But I think the conversation has to be open. Start with communication and education. It's available for anyone. If some people don't want to, they just want to cuddle or go to the garden, whatever it is for you.
Is go to the garden a euphemism?
Yes. No, meaning go and plant beautiful roses and maybe that's going to bring you joy. But if you want sex within your marriage, and it doesn't have to be off the table. Just get organized, and if that means reaching for the lube, which we have for you ladies, then so be it. No shame in it. And yeah, I created the business basically because I knew that this was something that women needed. They needed the emotional support, they needed the education, and they needed the hydration.
And they need it because there are real physiological and psychological changes that happen during this period. Dr. Pope, can you get into some of those specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a gynecologist, and so people come to talk to me about their reproductive organs and their vaginas and their vulvas. And there's a lot of good that happens with menopause where women don't have to worry about their periods anymore. They don't have to worry about getting pregnant, which is awesome. But there are a few things that can kind of make things more challenging. So as our estrogen levels decline through perimenopause and menopause, that really affects the vagina. And it makes things more dry and stiff, whereas otherwise with a lot of estrogen and lubrication, you have a little bit more elasticity and stretchiness. And so without that, people start to experience pain. Right? And then our testosterone levels also start to decline, and this affects our desire. And so when you have decreased desire, you have pain, these are things that make you really not want to have sex. And so I see women every day who are experiencing this. Unfortunately, they think that they're alone, but thankfully, if everybody's getting the word out, they are not alone. It's very treatable, and they can get back into having a wonderful sex life.
And beyond the physiological changes, there's also just the reality of certain things that, Naomi, you touch on in your book, like maybe you're wearing an estrogen patch and you don't know how to explain it to someone you're about to have sex with for the first time. Can you share that story? Because I know it's in your book.
It's a very personal story, which I definitely had to talk my husband into letting me share. He's a very private man, but yeah, going into a new relationship and having really, really personal conversations was quite difficult. I didn't feel equipped to have that at all. But what came out of it was a deep intimacy, because I just had to tell the story. I had to disappear in the bathroom, and I wasn't slipping into something more comfortable. It wasn't 1952 with my negligee and my purse. I literally went in there to scratch off the estrogen patch that I was wearing. And if anyone knows anything about those, they leave a nasty, sticky mess. And so I was in there too long, and I came out like flustered. And he said, "Are you okay? You're not in the mood." And I just had to sort of spill the beans and say, "Oh my God, I'm advanced aging. Menopause. Should I just leave?" I was for sure thinking he would think, "Ew, so gross." But that's just the societal stuff that we have let bleed into our psyche. And the minute I said it and explained what the patch was doing, he was like, "Wow, rock on. You're getting treatment. You've got things under control. How can I help?" And yeah.
Amazing.
So I do think bringing people into the conversation, naming what it is that you're going through, and giving them the ability to adjust their behavior or thinking. And, that was sort of the launching moment for me where my confidence built, not just in our relationship, but for me to start sharing my story with the world. And, I was in early menopause. It sucked, and I was lonely, and I was scared, and I didn't have a support system. But now just having his stamp of approval just filled me with confidence that I was able to go out there into the world and create the business and then write the book.
Amazing. So you owe it all to him.
I do. I actually do. You're right.
So you mentioned this idea of the societal pressures that creep into our mindsets. But there's also, the individual changes that happen in how we view sex. And Tamsen, I'm going to ask you to share the red bow story.
Oh. Thought I was going to get away without that one. Well, I mean, we both had marriages later in life, and I started dating my husband in my mid-40s. And I was very sexual. Like, it started off and it was hot and great, and I loved it, and it just felt just kind of fun and mysterious. And one Christmas, I said to him, like, what do you want for Christmas? I can't think. And he goes, "I just want you naked with a big red bow." And I'm like, okay, well. And so I was like, I'll do it. And so I did. So he came home, and I greeted him at the door, totally naked, with this big bow that I bought at like one of these card stores, and so that was like so fun. And then things change with your body, and sex had become just like not quite so enjoyable anymore because there's dryness, and so a year later he asked me I asked him, "What do you want? What holidays?" And he was like, "I love that red bow. Like, I can't get that out of my mind." And I go, "Are you out of your mind? I'm not doing that. Like, come on, that's it." Because I just really, it was not enjoyable, and we really had to talk about it and figure, lube, and, just really understanding my body and understanding what felt good at that point. But it's a difference, and I did feel like, gosh, were my best years behind me? Like, what happened? And now fast forward, 4 years later, and that's certainly not the case. So who knows what's going to happen this Christmas? But it really is something that, to pay attention to, and it didn't just, change overnight, and it really just became about communicating and having that conversation and bringing that intimacy in another way.
And Dr. Pope, how do you counsel your patients to have these conversations? Because they're not easy.
It's not easy. And you find that there are people who are in relationships for years and they say, well, but I can't talk to him about that. How can I do that? So I do tell people, well, why don't you suggest just kind of spicing something up? Why don't you suggest, hey, why don't we try a new vibrator? Or I'm gonna also add in this lube with the vibrator. Or, my doctor said that we need to have more sex, but I'm gonna have to use vaginal estrogen or maybe a hormone therapy, a patch, right, in order to do that. And I find that once they just break that barrier, their partners are so happy that they did.
Of course, for us, though, it can be really difficult to even accept that things have to change. I know, Naomi, at Stripes, you do a lot of social listening with your customers, and I think one of the sentiments you've talked about hearing is this idea that women want to feel like they did before.
Yeah.
Is that even possible, or how can you reframe that so that you're not constantly disappointed?
Yeah, I mean, it does, getting to the other side, the perimenopause stage, let's just all agree, it's awful. It can be, especially if you're not getting treatment, it's very, up and down, these adjustments of the hormones, and especially if you don't know what's going on, you just think you're losing your mind, and and everybody else around you does too, or can. It was like that for me before there was any conversation open. Things have changed massively in the last 5 years. Now I'm on the other side of that. I feel better than I did before. Definitely better than when I was in the perimenopause stage, and possibly better than I was in when I was in my 20s. I know my body. I know what it likes. I know what I'm after. I'm still desirous and desirable, hopefully. And I use support when I need to, whether that's in the form of lubrication, HRT, or just communication, or a glass of wine, or a sexy trip, whatever it needs to be. But I do find communication is the sexiest thing. If you can just get honest with what's going on and your partner is open, it really leads to a lot of goodness.
Yeah. Dr. Pope, we want to leave people here today in a position to not just have good sex, but great sex.
Yeah.
Because at Flow Space, we are all about women's health equity, including in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And so I would like to hear from you how we can achieve this.
Yeah, so I'm all about health equity, and health disparities are something that I'm very passionate about. And we have a huge health disparity when it comes to women's orgasms. Unfortunately, 10% of women, that's 10 out of 100, will die without ever having an orgasm.
Wait, say that again. Say that one more time.
10% of women will die without having an orgasm.
That's serious.
There's a graph that I like to show people where you see men experiencing orgasm compared to women. We don't have a lot of data on non-binary folks. But if you look at men, you see the graph kind of ticking up around 16, 17, 18. 100% have figured out how to have an orgasm. And they're probably having thousands of them by the age, right? And you look at the line for women and you see it's going up and up in the 20s and 30s, more and more getting there, but we never reach 100%. And I think what's really missing is attention to the clitoris. A lot of women don't realize that the clitoris is where it's at for an orgasm. And 80% of women need clitoral stimulation in order to achieve an orgasm, right? It's not like what we see in the movies or in TV where a woman spontaneously orgasms during vaginal penetration, right? And if you haven't been able to do that, I encourage you to explore on your own, get a vibrator, learn your body, learn your anatomy. It's kind of a wild thing for us to understand our own bodies and get to that point of pleasure, and then consider teaching someone to help you get there.
I love that you referenced how sex is portrayed on screen, because Naomi, I think there has actually been a bit of a shift when it comes to just showing women in midlife as sexual beings, which for me feels really radical. But do you feel that this is a shift that is sustainable, that is happening? What gives you hope or inspiration about how Hollywood is viewing women in
Yeah,
midlife.
exactly that. I mean, look at the movies at the end of the year last year that came out. I mean, Baby Girl was, I mean, pretty friggin' hot. And that's my best friend. Yeah, and Pamela Anderson, Demi Moore, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, Isabella Rossellini. You know, there's just stories being told of women of a certain age, because those stories matter too, whether they're sexual or not. We are curious. We want to see ourselves reflected in every kind of storytelling, whether it's films, you know, at the MoMA, or, you know, in books or media. We want to see. We want to feel less alone. We want to see and identify and go, oh, right, yeah, that's me. Now I get to understand that I'm okay, or even great. You know?
And what do you think is behind this shift?
I think it's all things coming together at once, converging, and it's not ever just one thing. I think life imitates art imitates life, and then, you know, the education, where now this conversation has opened up. There's so much information, whether it's books that are coming out. Tamsen has a fantastic book coming out 2 weeks from now. There's a litany of wonderful books that are, you know, written by doctors, or there's the internet. I mean, fantastic articles. That article that came out, We've Been Misled, in the New York Times a few years ago by Susan Dominus. We've just had this fantastic article in the New York Times, the best sex you can have in your midlife. You know, there is stuff available, and that is all creating the shift in real time. We're watching it. It's wonderful to see, and so it very much is heartening and filling me with hope.
And Tamsen, you created a little bit of a cultural moment of your own last weekend in Las Vegas, when you hosted what was billed as the world's biggest menopause party. When it came to sex, what did you hear from the women who attended this party?
Yeah, well, you know what? It was really fun to see. We had women from all over the world that came in, and you know, I think what we heard more than anything is that we're all out there, and we all want to talk about it, and we all want answers. And I think to what Naomi said, all of us are coming together at the same time. We're seeing, you know, we're seeing celebrities like Naomi come forward and talk about it. Like that kind of voice moves this conversation forward. We're seeing it happen, whether it's in communities, whether the communities are coming together saying, look, we're not taking this anymore. Experts coming together saying, like, this is the information. So we heard a lot of things. We heard that people want to talk about sex. That was a big one. There's no question about that. We spent quite a bit of time on sex. And we also talked about the fact that people want to know about what is happening during this time, and they want to know how to get onto the other side of it, because there are some beautiful times in this. There are there's many incredible faces out here that I know. Those of you that I don't know, I look forward to getting to meet you. But I got to tell you something. This is a really cool time in our lives. It's incredible in terms of this shift that we're seeing in the conversation of what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing in movies and TV, and I think it's only going to get louder. And that's really what we saw. We wanted to create the world's hottest menopause party, and I feel like, you know, we deserve it, don't we?
Dr. Pope, for women who are not yet experiencing menopause symptoms, you know, menopause is often preceded by this very long perimenopausal period that, as Naomi said, it really sucks. Is there anything that women can do to prepare themselves, to start getting ready, so that they do not feel as confused and alone when all of this stuff hits them really hard?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you should be talking about it early with your healthcare provider. That way it doesn't sneak up on you, and you're not going in when you really are feeling miserable, if you're going to get to that stage. Starting that conversation always also allows things to be a little bit less awkward if you are feeling awkward about talking about intimacy with your partner. With your healthcare provider. But number one, I would definitely make an appointment that's separate from your screening visit. I hear a lot of women who tell me how disappointed they are that they couldn't talk about these things at their annual wellness visits. But your healthcare provider is thinking about how to prevent cervical cancer for you, how to prevent breast cancer for you, and they probably are not allotting enough time that you deserve to talk about these issues. So first, make a separate appointment. Second, you may have to let some of your care providers off the hook because we're not all experts in everything. And if you came to talk to me about your knee, I'm definitely going to refer you to someone else. And you would want me to refer you to someone else, right? So ask for a referral for a sexual medicine expert or a menopause expert. And if you're not sure or your physician's not sure, look for resources. You guys are all proactive. That's why you're here today. And on our website, heymim.com, that's MIM, we've got a section under office hours that gives you resources for menopause certified providers and sexual medicine providers. And you can just put in your zip code and find somebody nearby.
Right. Tamsen, a couple of pieces of advice I've already heard: communication, lube, vibrator. Any other tools and tricks you have for folks who are hoping to maintain a healthy sex life in midlife?
Yeah, I think experimenting with different things, like, we talk a lot about, what we're going to do with like physical things, but I think like mentally, when you talked about going on a sexy trip, when you talk about getting kind of out of that place of like the bedroom, we go into the bedroom when we have sex. I do think that there is something to that of like kind of, opening up to different spaces, different places. I mean, not, within reason, but
don't get arrested.
Tamsen said. But I do think that there is something to that to shift your mindset. And I also think it comes back, aside from a partner, to you feeling sexy in your own body. I think there's really something to that as you get older, like learning what you want, who you are, not being shy about that, embarrassed, worry that the partner is not going to be receptive to that. So I think it's something that I've certainly learned, and then also talking with your provider. And that's not a question I've ever gotten in a doctor's office, like, how's your sex life? But I do appreciate there's an 85-year-old woman that's coming in there to tell you about it. So I think that's
if she can do it, we can all do it.
Absolutely.
Naomi, as you think about the conversations that you have with your consumers and the needs that they have and the wants, what's next for Stripes Beauty? Where do you see the product line going?
Yeah, we've got a lot of new things coming this year. We're very excited about identifying this community. Now it's just about expanding and getting the products in the hands of many. We're about to start a new raise. Next, we'll just continue to try and be innovative, and the social listening part is key. Like we need to know the symptoms of what you're going through. We need to know the problems to solve, so we continue to see and recognize you and know that we are you and reflect every one of these moments or hurdles that you're going through. From scalp to vag, we will keep you hydrated, and yeah, that's really it. And then continue. We have a platform that is creating education. We want to keep up to date with all of the science and good articles that are information that's coming out, and also strengthening the community, because we're nothing without that strength. We have to share our stories.
Yeah. I love all this conversation about how this can be such an incredible time in your life, which it really can be. But Dr. Pope, for someone who does not feel that way, who feels a little stuck in a rut and doesn't know how to get out of it, how can she start to get unstuck?
I would say we have so many resources right now, whether you're looking at your phone and looking at all these online resources that were just discussed or reading the books. I feel like people feel stuck when they feel alone, right? In all of these different areas of women's health, I've seen it where women feel isolated. But I try to tell people every day, you're not alone. I talked to 30 women today, in just one day about the same things that you're bringing up. And so we all need to talk to each other. And it may be, bringing it up in slightly of an awkward conversation, and then you'll find out that the person you're talking to actually has had the same exact experience or will have that experience. And know that whether it's desire, which affects about 50% of women, right, 1 in 2, at some point in their lifetime, the odds are with you that you're going to find a welcoming ear. You just need to bring it up, and we all need to do that work to destigmatize sexual health and destigmatize menopause.
What about the relationship component, separate from sex? How do you maintain a healthy marriage or long-term relationship during this period? As a newlywed, Naomi, I'm going to start with you. I know you've said communication has been really key, but how are you thinking about your relationship at this stage of life that's maybe different from how you thought about relationships when you were younger?
Just the most authentic self, to just bring that into the room, and that means, you know, owning your vulnerabilities and sharing them. And I think I'm really lucky. I've found a partner who is just deeply curious and compassionate, and was, you know, so empathetic as to what I was going through. And I think I can say he was turned on by the fact that I was able to say, this is what I want and need, you know, through the experience of growing into myself, with all my flaws and all my vulnerabilities. Because I felt safe in that relationship, and I could say, this is what I want, to feel hot or seen, I think that grows within the relationship. It finds a place for something quite wonderful to happen. And I just would say, just lean into being as honest and vulnerable as you need to be.
Tamsen, you're someone who has been very public about the divorce that you went through and then finding love again later in life. Can you share with the audience how you approached dating and what you were looking for differently again from when you were in your 20s?
Oh, yeah. I always say this, and usually it's not when my husband's in the room, but I think if I had met him when I was in my 30s, I'd have been like, no, I don't think so. He's like so nice. You know, when I was in my 30s, I was just looking for fun, and it was very different than, you know, now I think and I've said this a few times, is that I was looking for somebody to kind of like walk the world with, you know, and be there for that. And that was really important for me. And somebody that I like. Not being yourself is exhausting. It is just exhausting, right? It's so tiring, and it just takes so much energy, and it gets you like just nowhere at the end. And so I think that I'm appreciative that I am totally myself. I don't change for him. And he doesn't ask me to, and I think that looking for
And he
somebody,
lets you talk about the red bow.
and he lets me talk about the red bow. You might have to get another one this year for letting me talk about it. But I do think that that's really important. I think it's important that your energy is for you, and I also wanted to be with somebody that I could just kind of live that someday today with, you know, and not always be thinking about one day I'll do this.
Yeah.
So that's what I was looking for.
Amazing. Well, I'd like to end our conversation by asking you to think about a woman sitting in this audience who really wants to have the hottest sex of her life, no matter what age she is. What is one thing you would want to leave her with so that she can get there? Naomi, I'll start with you.
Oh My Glide. It's
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, or Vagivana. They're two products that will set you up. I'm not joking. Don't be afraid to use lube. And we have a beautiful bottle that you can sit right at the bedside table, and
All right, everyone's
enjoy.
downloading it right now. Dr. Pope.
Yeah, I would say, you know, get to know your body, become familiar with yourself, and don't be afraid of vaginal estrogen.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. You know, I would say to try something a little bit new, experiment. I'd grab the lube, oh my God, because you can also take it with you, because there's like a smaller one
mini
too, so that works out well. And you know,
For that sexy trip everyone's going to put out,
a
boss.
sexy trip. Yes, exactly.
Amazing. Well, you have all the information you need, so do with it what you will. But thank you to our amazing panelists today, Naomi Watts,
Thank
Rachel
you.
Pope, and Tamsen Fadal. Thank you all.